On a beautiful day of 30th September 2022, a very strong African man by the names of Ibrahim Traoré took power in a little known but beautiful country called Burkina Faso. What made him the most interesting military man than other dozens of African dictators who took power through the same methods like Traoré was that Traoré promised to give what Africans wanted, to kick imperialism from Africa, especially Burkina Faso, and make Africa the greatest place in the world. However, one of the questions that has lingered around is, since he took power through a coup, is he really an African savior or just another dictator that will end up making his country poor and killing every civilian like other African dictators that took power through a coup? Well, this video has to answer that question and also analyze what makes Ibrahim Traoré different and loved by every African. But first, we need to get the background of what has been happening in Africa. Short answer: imperialism, poverty, war, dying, crying, and dictators. Oh, the dictators. If dictatorship was Olympics, Africa would be the winner as a continent with the most dictators. For the most time, Africa had the most heinous, brutal dictators, including, but not limited to, Idi Amin, Mobutu Seko, Haile Maria, Hassan Habera, Kagame, Paulo Biima, Isis Afachi, Obiango Nguema. Wait. I want we focus on the last four military men: Kagame, Isis, Paul, and Nguema. Just like our darling Ibrahim Traoré, these were also military men and were very, very loved when they came to power. Isaias was seen as a liberator and a fighter who won independence for Eritrea. But this guy has ruled Eritrea since then up to today and has turned Eritrea into a North Korea of Africa. The difference between him and Kim is that Kim has baby chicks. Yeah, baby. Anyway, what of Kagame, the West's darling who revolutionized and industrialized Rwanda immediately after a genocide that had killed over 1 million Rwandese? Why is he on the list of the monster dictators? Well, who started the genocide? Minus that, Kagame and his moron army is in Congo killing Congolese as of this recording. Nguema, after Messiah's madness, people hoped for a change. Paul, seen as a stable successor after Ahmeduo Ahijo, but all these later turned into bloody, thirsty monsters. Now, the question is, how did the Africans reach an extent where they even celebrate when a military junta comes and snatches and steals their power, and Africa still celebrate him as a liberator? The desperation of African leadership. One thing to understand is that these dictators who have led Africa for decades don't operate in a vacuum. No, these are simple puppets of the West. The West gives them guns, money, and protection as long as these puppets won't be interfering in the business of the West rooting Africa. In fact, the West shields them from criticism. A vivid example is Mobutu, who was a true definition of a puppet of the West. Psych! That's a lie. Mobutu was the West's dog. Whoa. This pig stole and embezzled over 13 billion, but his hangouts were white houses in Western countries, while Congolese were sliding into abject poverty and instability that ultimately left Congo a failed state that is still a case today. But that is a simple example that doesn't explain the Burkina Faso and Ibrahim Traoré. You might say such. However, my friend, Burkina Faso is part of the Francophone sphere of influence, having been colonized by France. Hello, brother. I want to tell you a story of the most evil, most barbaric, most savage colonial power to ever exist. a colonial power so evil it makes the British say, "Fam, this getting out of hand. I need." Even after independence, France decided to kidnap the economies of its former colonies, and as of today, it controls the finances of 14 African countries. This translates to all these African countries have to remain under France's rule as French companies plunder the resources of these countries. And as evidenced, these countries are the poorest in Africa, most illiterate, and everything in these countries just bad. This is what has been the case of Burkina Faso. France continues exploiting resources like gold, and still the economy is under France. So when Ibrahim Traoré came to power, the first thing was to kick the French out, hence the saviour title he has achieved from Africa. What makes Ibrahim Traoré different? Now, to answer the question, will Ibrahim Traoré be a dictator and a West's puppet like other African dictators? Well, the answer is time will tell, and no one has the answer for that. However, that doesn't mean we can't look at his policies since he came to power. First, he had to replace USA, France, and the EU with China, Turkey, and Russia. So, basically changing a white imperialist with a yellow one. Whoa. That's a big statement. I have to clarify. Russia and China have been fundamental partners for Africa since the fight for independence to fighting neocolonialism. So anyone who says otherwise is a West's propagandist. 2. Ibrahim Traoré has collaborated with other neighboring countries that share his vision like Mali and Niger. 3. He hasn't armed the army to kill civilians. 4. He has focused on the development and industrializing of Burkina Faso. So, all the signs point to him as a savior, but does that guarantee that he shall be successful? Well, that is the next video, but as of now, Traoré remains Africa's liberator and savior. Thanks for watching. Kwaheri nipo chini, tutaonana.